Hey everybody, Nick Espinosa, your chief security fanatic here, and it is Sunday, so we are doing breaches of the week, and these are your very first breaches of 2021, as well as your very last breaches of 2020. Good riddance to that year. And before I begin, as always, I'd like to thank the following people that sent me messages, tagged me, IM'd me, whatever it was, to get me a lot of these breaches. It is always appreciated, and that would be William Price, Rich Jackson, David Walker, Jason Dance, Chris Fallon, Barrett Peterson, and Jacqueline Wolf. Guys, thank you so much. And if you have a tip for me, please feel free to send it my way. I'm happy to give you a shout out. And with that, let's start in Cincinnati, Ohio, with a company called iMed, because in July 2020, an unauthorized individual gained access to one of their employees' email accounts, and man, did this guy have a ton of PHI there, personal health information. They investigated the breach and determined that the mailbox contained the protected health information of 484,157 Aetna members, and we're not done. 60,545 members of Tufts Health Plan, and 1,340 members of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee. Now, no evidence at the moment shows that the PHI was either stolen or misused, but that's a default thing, and they're not sure. So the compromised email basically has and this is the list: members' names, dates of birth, vision insurance ID numbers, health insurance ID numbers, and for a limited number of individuals, social security numbers, birth certificates, diagnoses, financial information, and more. This only impacted current and former members of basically those health plans that are through iMed. So heads up to you, Aetna, Tufts, and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee, if you use iMed. Moving on. Let's talk about a Usenet indexer known as Nzb Geek. This has been hit. Now, the database was copied and exposed the personal information of all of its users. The attackers also managed to install a keylogger into the infrastructure, so they got in pretty deep. And so obviously change your passwords and all of that. But if you use Nzb Geek, your information is now out there. Moving on. Let's talk about Whirlpool. This is the home appliance giant. I think I've got some of them, some of their products in my house. They got hit with ransomware thanks to the Nephilim ransomware gang, who started publishing stolen files this past weekend from Whirlpool that included employee benefits, accommodation requests, medical information requests, background checks, and more. It's looking like employee data of Whirlpool was hit, not customer data. We don't know just yet. But anyway, if you have anything to do with Whirlpool, heads up to you. Moving on, let's head over to the Parliament of Finland. Yes, the entire parliament, because attackers gained access to the parliament's IT system in recent months in an incident that allowed them to access some emails belonging to members of parliament. This is obviously according to Finnish police this past Monday. The perpetrators, quote, have been able to obtain information either to benefit a foreign state or to harm Finland, end quote. And that is coming from their chief of police. Now, the attackers targeted multiple people in the incident, which law enforcement started investigating in the fall of 2020. The police are working with international partners to identify the attackers, and they don't know the scope and depth of it just yet, but there are a lot of state-sponsored suspects here so far that we know of, the rumor being, or rather pointing to, Russia, for obvious reasons. Moving on, let's talk about the Vietnamese Government Certification Authority. Attackers carried out basically a supply chain attack against private companies, government agencies, and others by inserting malware inside of official government software toolkit. Now, this attack, which was discovered by ESET, detailed in a report that they're calling Operation Sign Sight. It targeted the Vietnam Government Certification Authority, and this is the organization in Vietnam that issues digital certificates that can be used to electronically sign official documents. So pretty much any Vietnamese citizen, private company, or even other government agencies that want to submit files to the Vietnam government must have their documents digitally signed through the VGCA through their digital certificates. Now, they don't just issue these certificates, but they also have apps that they have created for these citizens, companies, etc., so that they can just install their computers into their computers to automate this process. But ESET said that sometime earlier this year, attackers broke into the website located at ca.gov.vn and inserted malware into two of the apps. So essentially, if you were doing business and getting your documents signed, with the Vietnamese government using one of these apps, you got yourself infected. Heads up to you. That's obviously pretty crazy. Moving on, let's head over to Japan because we're going to be talking about Kawasaki Heavy Industries. They make a ton of stuff, although most people know them for their motorcycles. Now, they announced a security breach and a potential data leak after essentially they had unauthorized access from one of their company's servers in Japan that hit overseas offices. And I quote, "As a result of a thorough investigation, the company has discovered that some information from overseas offices may have been leaked to external parties. At this time, the company has found no evidence of leaking information to the external network." The company said that it obviously took measures to monitor and restrict this. They're recovering, etc. This breach was discovered during an internal audit, and that is why, kids, we audit our infrastructure and our security. Moving on, let's talk about 26 different companies, of which I will talk about 8. Last Friday, a data broker began selling a combined total of 368.8 million stolen user records for 26 companies on a hacker forum. Now, this is interesting because on Friday I did my worst breaches of 2020, and I probably could have added this one to it had we known about it at that point. Now, of these 26 companies, only 8 are new alleged data breaches that were not previously disclosed. I went through the list, and sure enough, a lot of familiar names showed up there. But those 8 companies that did not previously disclose breaches that are now part of this are Teespring.com, MyON.com, CHQBook.com, AnyVan.com, Eventuals.com, WahooFitness.com, SitePoint.com, and ClickIndia.com. So if you use any of those sites, your information may be out there. All the others of the 26 have disclosed previously. Moving on, I want to talk about the Fume Media Group, or possibly Funke Media Group, coming out of Germany. Germans, please feel free to tell me, or German speakers, I should say, please feel free to tell me how to say that one right. Now, they said, I'm just going to go with Fume. I like Arrested Development. They just said on this past Monday that some of their 6,000 computers have been potentially affected on their network, and it's affected several central computer systems, basically at all of its locations in Germany. This is one of the largest media companies in Germany. Now, the editor-in-chief of one of the Funke-owned publications added in a statement that the, quote, colossal attack had left data on their IT systems encrypted and made them unusable. So hopefully the Funke or Funke media group will get back on their feet sooner than later. But 6,000 computers, that's a big hit. Moving on, let's talk about T-Mobile. This is the U.S. cellular carrier. According to reports from Bleeping Computer and Android Police, T-Mobile has within the past week or so begun to notify affected subscribers of, quote, malicious, unauthorized access to some of their account information. Now, thankfully, compared to the kinds that were basically obtained compared to the attacks that T-Mobile has had in the past, this one is much more narrower in scope. T-Mobile said the attack was limited to what the FCC regards as, quote, customer proprietary network information, which can include phone numbers, the number of lines associated with the account, and potential information about the calls placed, like phone numbers called, timing, and duration. The carrier further stressed essentially that the data that was accessed, quote, did not include names on the account, physical or email addresses, financial data, credit card information, social security numbers, tax IDs, passwords, or PINs. So in other words, they got information that can't identify you, according to T-Mobile. This is their second breach in less than a year. So T-Mobile, please step up your game. Moving on, let's talk about Ticketmaster. This is actually an update, and I found this to be really interesting, to be perfectly honest. Now, Ticketmaster is going to pay $10 million in criminal fines to avoid prosecution on charges in the United States that it repeatedly accessed the computer systems of a rival whose assets its parent company, Live Nation Entertainment, eventually purchased. Now, Ticketmaster's agreement resolves 5 criminal accounts, including wire fraud, conspiracy, and computer intrusion. Prosecutors said that from April of 2013 to December of 2015, so over 2 years, Ticketmaster employees used stolen passwords to repeatedly access computers belonging to this rival to obtain confidential business information. This rival is now owned by the same company that owns Ticketmaster, so here we are, $10 million fine. I'm curious to know who that goes to. Moving on, let's talk about Facebook. more specifically Facebook ads, because researchers from the security firm Threatnik spotted a large-scale campaign abusing Facebook ads. Now, threat actors were using Facebook ads to redirect users to GitHub accounts that were hosting phishing pages used to steal login credentials of its victims. Now, the campaign targeted more than 615,000 users in multiple countries, including Egypt, the Philippines, Pakistan, and Nepal. The landing pages are phishing pages, basically, that were impersonating legitimate companies. And so once you provided your credentials and all of that, they would essentially go and send you on your way, and they would steal your information. So obviously, Facebook ads, probably something you don't want to click on. Not that many people click on Facebook ads, but they're really good at advertising stuff you want. Not quite as good as Amazon. Moving on, let's talk about Ida Cruises. This is a German cruise line that is dealing with a, quote, mysterious IT restriction that have led to cancellations basically of their New Year's Eve cruises. So obviously that ship has sailed, haha. Now, Ada Cruises is a subsidiary of Carnival Cruise Corporation, which is the largest cruise line on the planet. And in an email seen by Bleeping Computer, Ada told passengers, basically for one of their cruise ships, that their trip was canceled due to IT restrictions on the company's phone systems and emails and all of that. Now, interestingly enough, another subsidiary of Carnival, another cruise line, Costa Crociere, basically is also affected by the same outage as well. And the parent company, Carnival themselves, disclosed that they had suffered a ransomware attack in August. And so essentially the speculation is that right now they're under cyber attack again, or this is stemming from that. We'll see what that confirmation is. But heads up, if you have anything to do, including booking passage on a Carnival cruise line or one of their subsidiaries, you may be in for a rough ride. Moving on, let's talk about Get Schooled. This is interesting. Now, the breach basically occurred, and this is a charity, I should say. Let me state this first. This is actually a charity that was founded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in collaboration with Viacom, and they left a database open and accessible to anybody with a browser and an internet connection. Now, according to sources, this breach impacts 930,000 individuals composed of children ages 10 to 16 years old, some young adults, and some college students. Now, the breached information contains extensive personal details of the children, teenagers, and young adults, including full addresses, schools, full student PII, including home phone numbers, emails, graduation details, age, gender, and more. And you know it's bad out there when Bill Gates can't protect your data. I'm sure he didn't design it himself, but come on, man. Moving on, let's talk about a firewall maker called Zyxel. They also make other hardware equipment. I believe it's more home or home, like prosumer kind of equipment. Zyxel has released a patch to address a critical vulnerability in its firmware concerning a hard-coded and undocumented secret account that could be used by an attacker to log in with administrative privileges and compromise the networking device. Now, according to the advisory published by Zyxel, who patched this, the undocumented account, ZYFWP, all lowercase, comes with an unchangeable password that I am not going to splay out. It's actually a pretty complex password, but it's stored in plain text in the actual unit themselves, and obviously could then be used by a malicious actor to log into the SSH server or web interface with admin privileges. Zyxel said that they had these hard-coded credentials put in place in order to deliver automatic firmware updates to connected access points through FTP, meaning they hard-coded this so they could phone home and get updates. That's just lazy. So with that, if you have a Zyxel firewall and you're not wanting to replace it for some unknown reason, please make sure it is completely up to date. And I swear it's like every 6 months I hear about something with Zyxel, with this. But anyway, I digress. Moving on. Let's talk about Northwestern Memorial Hospital out of Chicago. Now, the hospital said that basically a temp worker got access to patient records they were not allowed to see, and essentially that person was looking up medical records for more than a month. So there you go. There's no way, apparently, according to Northwestern, for them to access insurance information or social security numbers, but this temp worker could obviously see medical information, and so here we are, HIPAA breach. You really got to train your temps too. Moving on, let's talk about Blackbaud. Yes, they were the number 2 largest breach, on track to be number 1 until Solarwinds this year, as I stated in my worst breaches of the year video 2 days ago. We have another disclosure from that because this is the breach that will keep on going. Arcadia Hospital in Pasadena, California, is disclosing that their foundation has been hit due to the Blackbaud breach. So if you've donated money to the Arcadia Hospital or any foundation related to that, heads up to you. Blackbaud got your information out there. And finally, and we have 3 different finalies for today. The first one, and Bill Gates is having a bad week, because we're going to be talking about Microsoft. Now, Microsoft said this past Thursday that basically the far-reaching Russian hack of U.S. government agencies and private corporations has gone basically further into their network than what Microsoft previously understood. I am talking about the Solarwinds breach, the #1 breach of 2020, the breach that will keep on breaching. Now, while the attackers obviously suspected to be working for Russia's SVR, they've also been identified as APT-29, also known as Cozy Bear, which basically has been tracked since around 2014 by the Dutch AIVD. They're saying that they did not appear to use Microsoft systems to attack other victims, but they were able to view Microsoft's source code through an employee account. Now, Microsoft said the attackers were unable to get into the emails or products or services, and they were not able to modify the source code that they viewed. It did not, they did not say how long the attackers were inside the network or which source code had been viewed. Microsoft had initially said it was not breached in the attack and then reversed course a couple of days ago. And to quote Microsoft, "Our investigation into our own environment has found no evidence of access to production servers or customer data. The investigation, which is ongoing, has also found no indication that our systems were used to attack others." And I think this really underscores the severity of SolarWinds. We are going to be finding out, I think, for years at this point, that companies have been accessed in ways that they weren't expecting, whether these are proprietary design schematics, whether they're controlled unclassified information for the DoD or classified information, and on and on and on. This product basically caters to the largest governments, the largest corporations, and they're all running it. And so that 18,000 plus possible organization hit that was disclosed to the SEC by SolarWinds, I think is going to increase. But Microsoft initially said, no, we weren't breached. They're still investigating, and they found that they were. So that is obviously a huge problem. And the number 2 on finally is going to be your Ring doorbell and other smart home devices. And this is crazy. I've talked about something similar, but now it's getting basically taken to the next level. Attackers have started live streaming police raids on innocent households after they are hijacking the house's home device, the smart home device, the Ring doorbell, and basically then making a hoax call to the authorities. It said that the offender, and this is according to the FBI, it's saying that the offenders have even started speaking to the responding officers, basically via the hacked doorbell. So if you've got a Ring doorbell or another smart doorbell, you can basically communicate through it. So you could be sitting in Chicago and your doorbell in LA goes off and you can have a conversation with whoever's at your door. This is what they're actually doing. Now, this is marking the latest escalation of a crime that's known as swatting. Essentially, we've heard about this before where a threat is called in that the SWAT team has to resolve. In other words, somebody's in their house with a gun and they've taken hostages. They're going to get a SWAT team to their door, and that obviously is a very serious issue. If you recall, a fake call led to a hostage situation, or rather about a hostage situation, led police into shooting and killing a man in Kansas 3 years ago, and that obviously was a huge issue. Brian Krebs broke that story loose, and those people have been arrested and prosecuted, but the FBI says that this latest twist on this prank was able to be carried out because the victims had reused passwords from other services when setting up their smart devices. And if you watch me or follow me or listen to me, you know I hate password reuse, not to mention the fact that virtually everything you've got out there also has multi-factor authentication. Ring doorbells through Amazon. You can turn on 2FA and stop this kind of stuff. Now, the FBI alert on this said, and I quote, "The perpetrators call emergency services to report a crime. The offender watches the live stream footage and engages with the responding police through camera and speakers. In some cases, the offender also live streams the images on shared online community platforms." So they're live streaming images, pictures, video, all that kind of stuff through this. Please please use unique passwords. And finally, this is our last finally, we need to talk about journalists, producers, anchors, and executives at the news outlet of Al Jazeera. Now, this is coming from Citizen Lab. And if you don't know who they are, I will refresh your memory because I've talked about them before. These were the folks who actually caught Zoom routing North American Zoom meetings through China and not actually living up to their end-to-end encryption promises. They're the ones that blew the doors off of Zoom earlier this year that had cybersecurity scrambling, basically saying we should not be using Zoom because we cannot trust where the data is going. That obviously opened up a huge can of worms. So we're big fans of Citizen Lab over here. We like them. Now, they have some new reporting out, and this is directly quoting their statement. Now, I quote, in July and August 2020, government operatives used NSO Group's Pegasus spyware to hack 36 personal phones belonging to journalists, producers, anchors, and executives at Al Jazeera. The personal phone of a journalist at London-based Al Arabi was also hacked. Now, the phones were compromised using an exploit chain that we call Kismet, which appears to involve an invisible zero-click exploit in iMessage that's in the iPhone. In July 2020, Kismet was a zero-day against at least iOS 13.5.1 and could hack Apple's then latest iPhone 11. So basically, they're using flaws in Apple's products in the iPhone to essentially get in what is known as Pegasus spyware that then basically allows them unfettered access. Now, to continue, and I quote, based on the logs from compromised phones, we believe that NSO Group computers also successfully deployed Kismet or related zero-click, zero-day exploit between October and December of 2019. The journalists were hacked by 4 Pegasus operators, including one operator, Monarchy, that we attribute to Saudi Arabia, and one operator, Sneaky Kestrel, that we attribute to the United Arab Emirates, or UAE. Now, I think this is really underscoring a serious issue that we have here. And it's a couple of different things. One, it's making sure that we are keeping our products up to date. And even when they're up to date, understand that there may be vulnerabilities that have not yet been discovered. And if they have been discovered, they may not necessarily be public, and they may be used to exploit the phone. I have talked about this before, but this is much more pointed than my report, I want to say about 6 months ago or so, and essentially on NSO Group that was spying all over the place. They'd even bugged the Dalai Lama, for God's sake. So this is a very serious issue. The second one is the freedom of press, I think, is one of those things that's sacrosanct. They are essentially they're designed to keep the government in check by exposing lies, by making sure that everybody is honest. Obviously, really good journalists and really good standards for journalism require rigorous vetting, confirmation, verification, all of these kinds of things. But if we are allowing, let's say, a government or governments to get away with bugging phones of journalists, hacking into them, understanding who they're emailing, talking to, potentially private sources or confidential sources, that is something that's very serious that I think needs to be addressed. Saudi Arabia is not basically immune to this like anybody else or any other government should be. In fact, if you look up Jamal Khashoggi, that's one of those problems that we're talking about. Saudi Arabia has a very tight control over their media, as do many other countries. And that is something I think that needs to change in the world, because the media should be there to report facts and keep us honest. So that is your breaches of the week. Thank you all for who contributed. Happy New Year, everybody. And if you want to see the worst breaches of 2020, go check out my video/podcast from about 2 days ago on January 1st. And we'll leave it at that. But this was your breaches of the week and your news of the day. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, everyone.